Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time and most importantly, your civic engagement on the upcoming March 3rd election. So we're gonna go through this presentation. Yeah. My name is John. I'm with a company called Sorrel. We specialize in public education for ballot measures throughout LA County. So I'm gonna go through this presentation. Like I mentioned, we're gonna have some time for questions at the end. So as you guys know, the city of Duarte provides unmatched services. That's everything from public safety, well-maintained streets and sidewalks, park and recreation services, and other quality of life programs. We all understand this is part of what makes the city of Duarte such a great place to live, work, and conduct business. But, there's always a but, like many California cities, since the Great Recession about a decade ago, critical revenue sources for the city have fallen. That includes sales tax and property tax, and they haven't kept up with the cost of providing these great services that now the residents have come to expect. So while Duarte City Council has taken a number of steps to protect these essential services, including some reductions, challenges still remain, and that's kind of where we're at today, and that's what we'll go through in this presentation. So basically, if sustainable and sufficient revenue sources are not met to close a $1.2 million annual deficit funding shortfall the city currently has, the city council would need to evaluate some cuts to services, and they're expecting to have to cut about 10% of the city's overall budget this upcoming fiscal year. You know, like any household, you have to balance the checkbook, so the city goes through every single item when they make their budget, from public safety to parks to senior services, youth services, and they balance that checkbook, so to speak. So this includes a bunch of services that I'll go through later in the presentation. So basically, how did we get here? What's our current situation? In April of 2019, just this past year, the City Council approved the creation of an ad hoc Citizens Finance Committee. And what this committee did is evaluate and assess the city's long-term financial outlook and provided recommendations, whether it was revenue-raising recommendations or opportunities to save money, to cut expenses. And that was all at the goal to close this $1.2 million funding shortfall. The committee overall met 6 times and consisted of several members of the community, residents of the city. They were appointed and selected by the city council members. It was people from commissions, from the City of Hope, from the city's labor union, from the Duarte Chamber of Commerce. So just a collection of residents from the city got together for this committee. Dozens of options were examined, and some of these options are listed here. We can see on the left side for revenue raising, we have a general sales tax, which is now Measure D. TOT increase was looked at, which is a transit occupancy tax, and that's something you would pay when you go to a hotel. You see the tax on your bill there. That's a hotel tax, basically. A business license tax, an increase to waste collection charges, as well as parking permit increases. So those are some of the revenue options, something that would raise the revenue for the city that this committee evaluated. On the right, we have some opportunities to cut. And what they evaluated was eliminating a sheriff's day shift position, as well as a traffic enforcement unit. So there's an overlap between the sheriff's day shift and night shift. So currently in the city, there's a position that fills that gap. Other opportunities to cut were to cut additional staff positions for the city. Over the last decade, the city hasn't filled all the vacancies, so it has already cut some staff positions, but they evaluated up to 4 additional positions being cut. Reducing funding for the senior and teen center, so that includes everything from daily activities to after-school programs. Reducing city events, like maybe the 4th of July thing at the park. They would evaluate this, as the budget is being considered. And freezing existing city healthcare contributions for city employees. And basically at the end of this committee, they took a vote. And overwhelmingly, this committee supported a 3/4 cent sales tax, which is Measure D. In fact, 12 of the 14 committee members ranked this in their top 10 of options, and 10 of the 14 actually ranked Measure D, or a sales tax measure, as their number 1 option going forward. And many of the committee members noted that This would generate enough revenue to cover that $1.2 million deficit. Something like a TOT increase wouldn't raise nearly as much, and the city would still have to evaluate some cuts. Others expressed the preference for a sales tax being that it's a local measure, a local sales tax measure, so that benefits only this city, and it doesn't get sent out to the county. It doesn't go to the state, it would stay within this city. This information was all packaged together and presented to the city council just this past October, where the city council, deliberated and took all that feedback from the committee. And this is where we are today. So what is Measure D? After careful consideration, the city council decided the best course of action and to avoid these painful cuts was to present Measure D to the Duarte voters. So Duarte Measure D will be on the ballot, the March 3rd ballot. As Philip just mentioned, you guys can vote a little early, up to 11 days now at these voting centers, starting February 22nd. And what it would do is take the current 9.5% sales tax rate within this city and take it to 10.25%. So if approved by voters, Measure D would provide that funding necessary to protect some services, which we'll go through in the next slide, and cover that $1.2 million annual shortfall the city is currently facing. And we know that it'll keep Duarte a great place to live, work, and conduct business. So we're talking money, about how much money this measure would raise. So Measure D is expected to generate about $2.6 million in local revenue, and that's annually. And this would go towards the general fund. So this can go to any great services the city has already come to expect, and including public safety, parks, senior services. We'll cover that in the next slide. As I mentioned before, all revenue by Measure D would stay local, would stay in the city of Duarte to improve local community services and cannot be taken by the state, the county, or any other agencies. So you may be asking what services would fall within the general fund and what it would support within our city. So this is just a snapshot, some things it could include, but this is a big chunk of the city's budget. Obviously, public safety, sheriff, neighborhood patrols, and 911 response times. Youth and senior services can include preparing for wildfires and mud flows. As a hillside community, that's always a priority. Park and recreation services, everything from hiking trails to those play gyms for the kids, in the sand pit. Repairing streets and potholes, improving traffic conditions on these streets, addressing homelessness, and really anything you can see throughout the city. If somebody's painting a curb, that's part of the city's general fund to make sure the city continues operating. So part of the situation the city is currently seeing, and it's not just Duarte, a lot of cities are, a sales tax does not apply to certain things. Most importantly, a sales tax does not apply to groceries, and that's unprocessed food. So most of the stuff you'd go buy at the grocery store to prepare at home, that is not taxed. Something that's like a packaged item you bought at the store that's a hot meal, that would be taxed. It does not apply to prescriptions or medications, and it doesn't apply to real estate transactions or rents. And what we can kind of see what a 3/4 cent adds up to, this would cost about 75 cents for every $100 spent on a taxable item. 75 cents on a $100 item purchase, or about a penny per dollar. So less than a penny per dollar spent. And it's important to know that sales tax is collected not just from the residents within the city, it's also collected by visitors. So anybody who comes from another city to a local business or restaurant would be contributing to the city's general fund towards this Measure D sales tax. It's estimated that about 70% of the revenues would actually be collected from outside of Duarte residents, and those are the people that are coming to shop and dine at restaurants and businesses here in the city. Duarte's not alone in this. The current situation with LA County is a lot of tax dollars are leaving Duarte and these other cities. Local control is important because Duarte residents are currently paying that 9.5%. However, the city only controls 1% of it. So 9.5%, but the city only gets back 1% of that 9.5%. The remaining 8.5% is divided up to the county and to the state for various services, including regional public safety, transportation, and homeless programs, which we'll talk a little bit about coming up here. For example, this year the city of Duarte is expected to generate almost $12 million in a special sales tax for the county of Los Angeles, but they'll receive about 1.3 back. So you're providing 12 for the county, but getting back about 1.3 in services, or in funding for services within this city. And finally, Measure H, which was passed a couple years ago, which is the funding for homelessness throughout the county. Duarte has provided an estimated $1.35 million, $1.35 million to the county for Measure H funds, and has received about $30,000 to date. So 1.3 million, getting back about 30,000. And the issue is each city has to, ask for grants to get money from Measure H. So the importance with Measure D is that all this revenue from Measure D would stay in Duarte to be spent on local city services and cannot be taken by the state, county, or other agencies. So this graphic kind of displays the neighborhood within Duarte and just the region all across the San Gabriel Valley. So it's not just Duarte that's facing these financial challenges. It's not unique here. Several other cities in the county, many neighboring counties as well, have sales tax measures that have already passed. This includes Arcadia, El Monte, Glendora, Irwindale, Monrovia, Pasadena, and Sierra Madre. And that's just within this general vicinity. All across LA County, you're seeing cities do this. And so all those cities have already gone up to the 10.25 sales tax level, or most of them. Some are at 10. And also on this March 3rd ballot, in our neighboring cities, we have Alhambra, Azusa, Norwalk, San Dimas, San Gabriel, and West Covina all have almost identical measures on their March 3rd ballots to protect city services within their cities. So as you can see from this map, Duarte is currently at the minimum that is allowed for LA County, 9.5, and Measure D would take the sales tax to 10.25 to be better in line with the neighboring cities. And a lot of times we get a question on, how can we be so sure the money is going to go where the city says it's going to? Measure D includes strict accountability. There's transparency in audits. This includes a public disclosure of all spending and an annual independent financial audit. This would ensure all funds are effectively and spent as promised and only to benefit the Duarte community. Every penny raised from Measure D is legally required to be used in Duarte. Cannot go to the county, cannot go to the state. So to wrap up, Measure D is a part of a comprehensive program. We created a special landing page on the city's website. It's DuarteMeasureD.com, DuarteMeasureD.com. It has other useful information beyond what you see in the presentation today. It has links to our fact sheet, to the frequently asked questions sheet, as well as an impartial analysis of the measure and arguments in favor and against the measure. So all that information is on DuarteMeasureD.com. I encourage you to visit this website, share it with others who may be interested, other residents, family, and friends. And you can learn more about Measure D there, but also more about the voting experience that will be upcoming for the March 3rd election that Philip mentioned earlier.